From the Arizona Daily Star and Tucson.com, this is the Wildcast.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of the Wildcast podcast. Justin Spears, Michael Lev, and Alec White, and we are wrapping up the 2021 football season. We're going to recap all things Arizona Wildcats football in Jedd Fisch's first season at the U of A. Before we do so, make sure you subscribe to the Wildcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and also be sure to check out all of our content on all things Arizona Wildcats and Southern Arizona sports on the Wildcaster app, which you can download for free off the App Store and Google Play. We got stories, we got videos, podcasts, photo galleries, everything you need is all at your fingertips on the Wildcaster app. And we're not doing like this like Cyber Monday, or you know how the Black Friday deals kind of carry over a week.
Yeah.
So it's always like, oh, one day only, but it carries over for an entire week. This is a great Black Friday deal because it's literally year round and it's free. So download the app.
It's a great holiday gift.
It is. And it's free.
To yourself.
And it's free. So download the Wildcaster app. All right, guys. So we also have our final Pac-12 pick'ems. Well, I should say Alec and Lev has their final Pac-12 pick'em. I'm out of the race for this year. But we're going to have these guys dissect the Pac-12 championship. Got Oregon against the Utah Utes. Then we will also talk about USC hiring Lincoln Riley and what this means for the Arizona Wildcats and the rest of the Pac-12. But guys, before we get into the entire 2021 season and what this means for the Arizona Wildcats moving forward, we got a little bit of breaking news happening on Wednesday. Wednesday morning, Arizona announced that they are hiring a new defensive coordinator, Johnny Nansen, who comes over from UCLA. He's spent, a number of years in the Pac-12. He's been in the Conference of Champions for a little over a decade now. He is a Washington State alumnus, coached at Washington, also coached at USC as well, has deep ties in the Southern California area. He's from Samoa. So you look at all the things that Arizona needs in a coach. And he's also, 47 years old, 48 years old? So, young coach. This is the first time he's ever been a defensive coordinator. So while that may be a concern, he still checks all the boxes for what Arizona needs in a defensive coordinator. A guy who's young, a guy who understands the landscape of the Pac-12, and a guy who can really recruit. Now, X's and O's wise, not really sure what this means for Arizona, but after less than a week-long search, Arizona has its guy at defensive coordinator to replace Don Brown, and that is one Johnny Nansen. Guys, open up the floor to you. What do you think about this move for Jedd Fisch and his staff?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with Johnny Nansen. I overlapped with him when I was covering USC. He came to USC from Washington with Steve Sarkisian. I believe he coached linebackers at that time. No, it actually might have been running backs. He's coached on both sides of the ball, which is interesting. He's coached special teams. I'm not sure what position he's going to coach at Arizona. Probably will be involved with linebackers, I would guess, unless Ricky Hunley wants to go to linebackers, because he could probably do either one of those. He's the current defensive line coach who, of course, played linebacker back in the day. But, this to me was a choice that Jedd Fisch decided to make. There might have been a handful of quote-unquote perfect defensive coordinator candidates who had it all, had experience, X's and O's acumen, and recruiting chops. But I don't know how many of those there were, how many of those are realistic to bring to Arizona. So he made the decision in making this hire that I'm going to go for the guy who's got the recruiting background, the recruiting bona fides. Okay, I'm going to look, according to 247 Sports database, some of the players who were primarily recruited by Johnny Nansen during his time at USC or UCLA. Adoree Jackson, Ronald Jones, current wide receiver Gary Bryant Jr., Solomon Tuliaupupu, Talanoa Hufanga, Trayvon Sidney. I could go on and on here. Vave Malapai, Kanai Mauga, Tuli Pelotu.
Oh, wow.
I mean, these are dudes, right? I mean, now that does not mean that he can get all of those guys to come to Arizona, but if he could get one or two of those a year, or maybe kind of that next level down among those really good Polynesian linemen from Southern California or from Hawaii or wherever to come here, I mean, Arizona needs that, and I think when Jedd Fisch took stock of things, and he's like, Chuck Cecil's a great coach, Dwayne Walker's a great coach. There's only so much the great coaches can do with the talent that Arizona currently has.
Yeah.
Like, people complained a lot about Chuck Cecil, okay? And they're like, the safeties are the worst position on the team, blah, blah, blah. And my response would be, he can't make them faster, okay? I mean, these guys weren't out of position. They're just getting beat.
Yeah.
And they need better athletes at those positions to compete in the Pac-12, especially as we'll talk about later with Lincoln Riley coming in, and he's going to recruit the heck out of USC. So to me, the thought process from Jedd here was, I'm going to bring in the guy who, he's more of a recruiter than an X's and O's guy. I've got people in-house who can aid him on the X's and O's front with defensive coordinator experience already in Chuck and Dwayne.
The thing that jumps out to me is his familiarity with the Pac-12. You look at Arizona's coaching staff, and on the defensive side, there's not really any coaches that have experience recruiting and coaching for long stints of periods in the Pac-12. Chuck Cecil's only been in Arizona, and he's, half of that time was an analyst. Ricky Hunley, well, he played in the Pac-12 and is one of the most respected defensive players in U of A history. Hasn't been a coach in the Pac-12 for that long. Don Brown was a Massachusetts and Michigan guy from the East Coast recruiting those types of players. So it helps Arizona to have a footprint of players and a coach in the Pac-12 that knows the area, that can recruit against the USCs and the UCLAs that are going to be battling for those type of players in California. So I think it's an important hire. But Lev, you made this notion on Twitter today that I think is important about the turnover of defensive coordinators at the Arizona for the last 2 years since 2019. There's been 5 different defensive coordinators. He's a guy that needs to stick around for a couple years because, man, Arizona needs somebody that's going to be there for the long haul on the defensive side really badly.
Well, I think that's why they went after somebody like him, as opposed to the wish list of guys that we posted on our website, because this is the first time he's ever been a defensive coordinator. So this is like a big moment for him, because now he's finally overseeing an entire defense, or at least being the head coach of that defensive unit. So I feel very confident in saying that a guy like Johnny Nansen is going to be able to stick around for the long haul. And I agree with you guys; they need it, because it's so difficult as a player to constantly learn these new defensive schemes. Like I almost felt really bad for somebody like Anthony Pandy, who was relied on so many times as a middle linebacker or a will linebacker. And when you're embracing so many different defensive schemes, that can really mentally just bog you down. And now they're going to finally get some stability. But, the one key element here, Lev, and we actually all talked about this, I believe it was after the Utah game, when we were discussing the possibility of Don Brown leaving. And, if Arizona were to get a new defensive coordinator, what are some requirements or things that would help? And having a coach with Polynesian ties is huge. Like Jordan Paopao is the only guy who comes from a Polynesian background, where Johnny Nansen is from American Samoa. You just listed all the players that he has recruited. And when you think about the golden era of Arizona football, it was during the Dick Tomey era. Well, what was Dick Tomey incredibly great at? That is establishing the Polynesian pipeline and getting so many players of Polynesian descent to come out to Arizona. So I think this is a great move for a number of reasons.
Now, people will say they had a defensive line coach with, who was Polynesian a couple years ago, right? Yona Yungalale, and he didn't really make that big of an impact. I think the difference here is that Yona came from the junior college ranks, whereas Johnny Nansen, as Alec mentioned, has been in the Pac-12, has been waging these battles for years and won a lot of them.
Yeah.
He's probably not going to win quite as many at Arizona, but I think the idea of it is very appealing to me. I'll be interested to see if they keep Keith Dudzinski. I don't know if he's a fit with this whole direction that they're going. He was literally called the Robin to Don Brown's Batman by the head coach when he was brought in here. So, there's a couple interesting names that I've heard out there. It could be possibilities to add to the staff that again would make the staff younger and maybe help on the recruiting front. But it's a really interesting move. I said the other day that, of those two areas, X's and O's or recruiting, that I would lean toward recruiting. You got to have guys.
What's the old saying? It's all about the Jimmies and the Joes.
Yeah,
rather
not
than the X's.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you want to be smart and have good strategies and plans, so on and so forth. But I might sound really dumb saying this, but I think it's more important on offense to be that X's and O's guy than it is on defense. How many different defenses can you call? And did Don Brown call too many? I mean, how many times did they have too many men on the field? Running guys on and off.
Yep. Not enough.
I mean,
they had 10 guys.
They had, I counted. So they had 10 guys on the 2-point conversion, called timeout, and then after the timeout still had 10 guys on the field. So, I mean, that's problematic, obviously. Yeah. An isolated incident. Don Brown did a very good job here. But like I said, I think after his 1 year here at Arizona, Jedd Fisch came to the realization that we need more dudes.
Yeah.
And I think he thinks Johnny Nansen can help him get some of those dudes.
I just now realized this. The GIF that you tweeted out earlier was of The Shining. Was that because of Here's Johnny?
That was a Johnny.
Okay.
Yeah. That's correct. Yeah, I was looking for ones that wouldn't completely give it away, and a lot of them actually said Here's Johnny on them. So, and I also wanted to wait and kind of till the last minute because I knew when it was coming out. But
she was like Johnny Bravo, guy flexing his muscles. All right. Well, we were just talking about the issues with subbing in players, and there are a number of issues this season for the Arizona Wildcats. So I think this is a good transition into reflecting on Jedd Fisch's first season at the helm at Arizona. So Arizona goes 1-11, most losses the program has experienced in a season. The second time only in program history that Arizona's had double-digit losses, the first time happening in 2003, the year that John Makovic got fired. So now, as we look back on the season, issues, things that Arizona can hang its hat on. Of course, we all want to start off with the issues, right? So, biggest issues of concern for the Arizona Wildcats. I will be the first one to say, beyond the substitution issues, I think the number one thing Arizona has to work on this season is the red zone. Not being able to score touchdowns whenever they get inside the 20-yard line. They're worst in college football in that category. And for a guy who's been like the quarterback guru, or a guy who's known for having great offenses, we didn't see a lot of points from Jedd Fisch in that side of the ball. Now, with that being said, we talk about Jimmys and the Joes. I think over time, the more Jedd Fisch gets the guys that he wants for his system, then Arizona's offense is going to start to evolve. But man, there was just way too many times Arizona got inside the red zone this season. It was just very problematic. So I think red zone's the biggest point of emphasis. Jedd Fisch says first day of practice, they're literally going to start right with that. So what do you guys say?
For me, Arizona is not a team that can make mental mistakes week in and week out and expect to win a football game. And there were too many times this year where that was the case. Boneheaded mistakes. I mean, there were, sure, against ASU, there were some penalties that we did not see coming. We didn't even know existed, like the illegal fair catch and some of but
I learned a lot about college football this year because of Arizona.
But these are things that programs don't, winning programs do not make these mistakes. And to me, one of them or a couple of them weren't even when the game was going on. So we learned after the Arizona State game that U of A players had gotten into a pregame skirmish with an ASU. I don't know if it was a trainer or a grounds crew keeper, but there were some end zone discussions going on, and players were, one of the players on U of A touched, full pads and helmet, shoved an ASU staffer, and then they, come to find out that they dug up the grounds at the logo. And Arizona's not a team that can have that can come in with that bravado, and do it, because they got beat by ASU 5th straight year. They're not a team that can overcome some of these mental, I don't know if I would call that one a mental mistake, but I don't know, just not.
Like Arizona in that situation, like, rather than putting your cleats in your opponent's turf, that same opponent that beat you by 6-3 points the year prior, it almost has to be like a strictly business trip.
Yeah.
You got to be tunnel vision, focus. Don't worry about anything else other than going out and beating them.
Exactly.
They didn't do that. It was all about the rah-rah, everything outside of the game itself. And that's the part that I agree with you.
So, yeah, the mental mistakes of knowing defensive assignments, holding penalties, targeting penalties. Like, Arizona just needs to be a more disciplined team up front. And we've heard Jedd Fisch say as much all throughout the year, because we ask him every Monday about penalties, and we know guys are running and doing things, but at some point it's up to the Arizona players to have accountability with themselves in the locker room, not to have as many self-inflicted wounds, because the coaches can only do so much of making you run and saying we can't have these penalties. So long-winded answer about penalties, but to me, like, goes back to my original point. Arizona cannot be a team that commits 8 to 12 penalties a game and expects to win a football game.
100%.
Yeah, you hit on some really good items there. I would add turnovers to the mix. You just can't win in football when you're in the red in turnovers, and they're the worst in the nation in that regard. Too many giveaways, not enough takeaways. I know there's a certain element of luck that plays into that particular statistic, but they've got to turn that around. I'm not saying that they have to go from minus 16 to plus 16, but if they can be around even, get around one takeaway a game. I mean, you can't go through a season with 6 takeaways in 12 games and expect to win. And with half of those coming against NAU. I mean, it's just impossible. You always hear talk about the little things, the little details. I think that speaks to Alec's point. Like, you can't make those mistakes if you're Arizona. Maybe you can make those mistakes if you're Georgia or Alabama or Clemson or Ohio State, and you have a bunch of 4- and 5-star players on your roster, and you can out-talent people or outspeed people or what have you. They just put themselves in a bind so many different times. If turning the ball over, putting the defense in a difficult situation, committing a dumb penalty or an unnecessary penalty that turns a 3rd and 2 into a 3rd and 12. How many times did we see that stuff? And that adds up over the course of time. Jedd calls those failures in the red zone 4-point plays. You go from scoring potentially 7 points to scoring 3. That happened 3 times in the first half against ASU. So instead of having 21 points, they have 9 at halftime. All those things add up, and they kept happening over and over and over again. The ASU game was just a perfect microcosm of the season, because everything that they did wrong over the course of the year, they did wrong on that Saturday in Tempe. He has outlined what the problems are, and they're going to go about trying to fix them as best they can as soon as spring practice begins.
So what's one thing that Arizona can hang its hat on? What's a big positive that you could take away from all this? Because I can't believe it's been almost a year. We're approaching exactly a year here in the next, less than a couple of weeks since Jedd Fisch was hired as head coach. So it's been a long 11 months for Jedd Fisch and the Arizona Wildcats, but something that Jedd Fisch and the staff can take moving forward that maybe provides some optimism. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think recruiting has been much better like they're actually starting to sell the vision to guys that maybe Arizona wouldn't have gotten in the past. Like the fact that Tetaroa McMillan, a 5-star player, one of the best wide receivers in the class, even gave Arizona a look and even visited the campus. I'm sure it helps that his quarterback and the tight end and the linebacker and Jacob Manu going here probably helped. But the fact that Arizona was able to get in the mix with some of these kids, when in the previous regime, we all thought that Kevin Sumlin, in his recruiting prowess and what he did in the past, getting guys from Phoenix to go out to Texas A&M like Christian Kirk and Kyle Allen, everyone thought that he might be able to replicate that here. But instead, they were getting commits, and you look at other schools that these guys are considering, and it's like Arizona's out recruiting Louisiana Lafayette and Houston Baptist and North Texas. And it's like, yeah, these are schools that Arizona should out-recruit. But you got like A.J. Jones, wide receiver from Southern California. I mean, he decommitted from UCLA and flipped to Arizona. They were able to get Kean Burnett, the highest-rated tight end since Rob Gronkowski, to decommit from USC and then flip to Arizona. So I think that right there is an encouraging sign for Arizona. And if the class stands the way it is right now, it's going to be the highest-rated class in 16 years, which I think says a lot about Jedd Fisch and their efforts on the recruiting trail.
Yeah, they still have to close that class out, of course, and with so many coaching changes, there's still a lot of uncertainty out there. To put a bow real quickly on the red zone stat, the point differential between Arizona's opponents and Arizona as far as scoring in the red zone was 227 to 133. That's 94 points, which comes out to almost 8 points per game. So that's the difference in red zone offense and defense for Arizona and its opponents. As far as encouraging signs, I would say a couple things. One, just the attitude of the players, how hard they played the entire season. I thought that was a good sign that shows that you're building a culture the right way. And then I would say the development and emergence of some young players. Like Stevie
Singer.
Rocker Jr. looked really good every time he was given an opportunity. Dorian Singer looked like a diamond in the rough. JT Hand, I thought, really held his own when he got in there on the offensive line. Parrish Shand, Jedd pointed out that they didn't expect him to get as many snaps as he got this year, and he looks like he might be a dude for them up front. Keon Bars, I think, went from a kind of an unknown to a really good player who's probably going to be talked about as an all Pac-12 kind of guy. Traden Stukes, another one who really looked like he belonged at the cornerback position. So, and the specialists, Kyle Osendorp might be the all Pac-12 punter this year, and Tyler Loop is 12 for 12 on field goals to start his career, which is, you can't do better than that, right? So I think those two things to me stand out. That's a good nucleus. It's a good place to start.
I also had special teams on my list, but I think for me it was Arizona not being a tough out for a lot of good Pac-12 teams. I mean, there were some games where they they didn't have a great showing. Washington State, ASU, they were in it, and then the second half kind of went in the favor of the Sun Devils, but they played really well against USC and Utah, two teams that Arizona usually has trouble with every year in the Pac-12 South. Didn't win those games, but played really well, and ending the losing streak. It seems weird to highlight that as you can hang your hat on, but they really can. If Arizona had lost that game to Cal and we were in this position, it would have been 24.
How different
25?
would this podcast be?
It would be, yeah. It would be a much different tone for the
24,
offseason.
24 game losing streak.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like 1-11 is great by any means. It's not anything that you'd strive for, but that is a great point, Alec. It would be so much worse if they hadn't figured out a way to win that one game.
And you're carrying that for how many months?
Oh God. It's all anyone would talk about. And thankfully they're talking about something else.
Yeah.
Anything else is better than that. It's hard to recruit as is, to Arizona, but when you're going around being like, oh yeah,
Come be a part of the change.
24 game losing streak. Yeah. That's really tough. So yeah, I agree with Alec. Very good point.
Real quick, everyone seems to have a lot of questions about the quarterbacks. So I'm curious to get your guys' takes on this. So Jordan McLeod looked like he should have been starting all along, then got injured in that game against UCLA. They were competitive in that game against Oregon. Even with the 5 interceptions, like they were right there against the Ducks. I expect Jordan McLeod to come back and compete for that starting spot. Maybe Will Plummer decides to give it another run.
Why wouldn't he?
I think if there's anybody that's probably going to transfer out, it's probably going to be Gunnar Cruz. But still, again, we don't know the situation. We could be right back here talking about another 3 quarterback race, and then you add in a guy like Noah Fafita into the mix. So I'm wondering, like, what's going to happen in that quarterback room?
I'm very curious to get your guys' thoughts on this because,
It's rich with talent.
I have debated internally and externally whether they should or not. I mean, does it make sense to go after, to recruit hard one of these former like 4 or 5 star quarterbacks who are on the market, who are from Arizona, like Jack Miller, Chubba Purdy, Spencer Rattler. I mean, a lot of schools are going to be interested in those quarterbacks. Those quarterbacks, potentially Keaton Slovis, probably Keaton Slovis.
Yeah.
Are those quarterbacks going to want to come here? And does it make sense to bring in someone like that? Now, you're upsetting the apple cart, right? I mean, you're disrupting the chemistry in that quarterback room. You have a couple of guys who showed really good signs that they could run this offense. And I think the other factor to consider is there's a learning curve with this Jedd Fisch system. For better or worse, we saw that, right? I mean, Jordan McLeod couldn't get here until June, and he wasn't ready to play right away. It took Will Plummer until like mid-season before the light bulb kind of went on, and he started to really get it. So if you're bringing someone in, even if you can bring him in here in spring, they're going to be behind the other guys. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I'm curious. Would you do it, Alec?
I would go into the transfer portal.
Okay.
I think the one thing Arizona fans are going to look at, or the coaching staff with Jordan McLeod, is they're going to reflect on the Oregon game and say, you know what, if you take away those 5 interceptions, maybe Arizona wins that game. And then he played pretty well against UCLA. But that is a very, very small sample size to bank on that and say that is replicable for the following season.
Yeah, he played at South Florida.
He did. He had some good games.
But you're also betting on him being healthy.
You're also
again.
It's a huge risk to go in and assume that the Jordan McLeod you get is going to be better and improved. Like, of course, you think, another year in the system, but what if he's not? What if you have to go in, you're forced in the scenario where we were in this season with Arizona's quarterback, is maybe we find out Jordan McLeod wasn't the guy we were expecting, and then you're back into the cycle of playing Will Plummer and then maybe forcing Noah Fafita to play before he's ready to take a snap. So I think you go into the transfer portal. Maybe you get a guy that can play at Arizona for a year or two, and you have a quarterback competition. If Jordan McLeod is really the guy that maybe the Arizona coaching staff thinks he is, or Arizona fans think he is, then he is going to win the job out of camp.
Yeah, no,
and you save Fafita for the 2023 season. 2023.
Yeah, Jedd has said many times our program is built on competition, right? All these coaches believe in that idea, so it makes sense on the surface to bring in somebody to add to the competition in that quarterback room. But you also don't want to get into a situation like last year either, or this past season, where you don't have a guy or you don't know what you're doing. I think it'd be really helpful maybe by the end of spring to say, this is our quarterback, and he's going to lead all the off-season stuff that they do, and we're not going to have to deal with a controversy. The other thing is, these guys who are on the market, the big name guys, they're not going to want to come into a situation where they have to compete. They're going to want to come into a situation where basically, you're the starter.
Well, and also they got to think about their health and safety as well. Like, if you're a big name quarterback and you're like, okay, well, let me look at Arizona's offense and the way they played last year. Oh, geez, there's no protection whatsoever. Do I really want to go in there if I'm Spencer Rattler and I'm like, hey, I'm trying to improve my NFL draft stock? If I have less than 2 seconds to throw the football, do I really want to go into that situation? No. So I think, obviously, point of emphasis has to be offensive line, but I think Arizona has to be careful on who they reach out to. But hey, swing for the fences. Go offer every single Arizona quarterback that's in the transfer portal right now, and see what we can get. But I'm also thinking about their point of view, looking at Arizona and thinking, man, they got offensive line problems. I don't want any problems with that.
I want to talk about Will Plummer just for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
We talked about Gunnar Cruz potentially being a transfer guy, but if I'm Will Plummer, and he's not going to be the guy next year, I think Will Plummer is a capable quarterback in college football, but I don't know if he can do that consistently at the Power 5 level. If he's got 3 seasons left?
3 years left.
3 years left. If he's not going to be the guy at Arizona and he gets buried and he's a third string, I think he can make an impact somewhere else. I'm not saying he should transfer or can't be Arizona's guy, but it'd be hard pressed if you're Arizona and you're depending on Will Plummer. This is no disrespect to Will Plummer, but I just think Will can fit in somewhere else at maybe a smaller school. Go to the Mountain West Conference. Yeah. Go
to San Diego State and beat the Arizona Wildcats in the season opener next year.
It's possible, but I think this was Will's chance when Jordan McLeod came out to possibly have an audition for a team that can use him in college. Because I think there was a lot of growth in Will Plummer, but I just don't know if Arizona can ride out Plummer's growth through the duration of his time at Arizona.
He was so much better throwing downfield in that ASU game than any previous game. He was 4 for 4 on passes thrown 20-plus yards, 7 of 11 on passes from 10 to 19 yards. And we did not see that at all out of him. And you got to be really encouraged by that. Kind of like how 50% of all marriages end in divorce. The odds are that someone who's currently in the quarterback room is going to transfer at some point. Whether that's this upcoming off season or somewhere down the road. It's just the way things work these days. And I get what you're saying about Will, but he's also he's someone who really believes in himself, and he's kind of been an underdog throughout his recruitment and throughout his college career. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if he felt like, what, I'm the best guy here. I'm going to stick around and I'm going to win the job. And Jordan McLeod probably feels the same way about himself
100%. Too.
Mm-hmm. So, I can, especially if Gunnar Cruz decides to leave, and like you said, probably the most likely of the three to be in that category, I could see them bringing somebody in. Might not necessarily be a super high profile guy, but you don't want to be in a situation again like you were this year where you basically ran out of quarterbacks. Yeah. I think you probably want to have 4 scholarship guys in that room if you can. And if they lost Gunnar and they bring in Fifita, they would need to add one more veteran.
All right, guys, before we get to our Pac-12 picks, I want to get your thoughts on Lincoln Riley getting hired at USC. Not the guy who I thought was going to get hired by the Trojans, but, man, what a big-time hire for SC. Lev, you covered USC for multiple years. It was the latter part of the Pete Carroll era, and then you got Sark, right?
And then we got Lane Kiffin. Got Sark. Got a little bit of Clay. Had a little bit of everything.
You got everything. You're very familiar with USC football, but I will say this. I love the hire, and we see multiple reports that Lincoln Riley wasn't very happy with Oklahoma going to the SEC, and I could imagine so because, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, LSU, those are all teams that you have to compete against to get into the college football playoff. Or you can go to a program like USC, and Lincoln Riley's only 38 years old. He's coached Heisman-winning quarterbacks, number 1 overall draft picks, and he's right in the entertainment capital of the world. Now with the new era of NIL, Lincoln Riley looked out to the Coliseum and said, I want to make this the mecca of college football. So Lincoln Riley has a vision for USC football. We all know USC and the tradition, winning national championships and consistently going to the Rose Bowl. Pac-12 football ain't Pac-12 football unless USC football is consistently in that national contender mix. So I love the hire. Unfortunately for everybody else in the Pac-12, especially in the South, it's like, okay, well, now what? how are we going to recruit at the same level at USC? How are we going to be able to compete for the South every single year? So I think this move is great for USC, but it could be potentially bad news for the rest of the conference as they are pretty much. I'm not to say they're competing for second place every single year, but man, competing against USC when they're right there at the top, it's very tough.
Yeah, but it's good. It's good for the league, though.
It
As
is.
you said, if USC is a powerhouse, like that is good for the Pac-12 because that gets you a seat at the table for the playoff, whether it's remains at 4 or goes to 8 or 12 or however many teams are in it. I think what we've said all along about USC is you need the right guy. And if you have the right guy, that place can be the mecca of college football. It was not that long ago the place, right? During the Pete Carroll era there, I think that Lincoln Riley wisely took a look at the landscape and said, Oklahoma's going to the SEC, and it's going to be really hard for us to continue to be Oklahoma in that super competitive environment. USC can be in the Pac-12 what Oklahoma has been in the Big 12. They can be the Kings. And you've got tons of talent right there in your backyard. You're a young, dynamic, offensive mind, great recruiter. He's beyond what I think anyone expected USC to be able to land based on all the conversations that were going on. I think, too, it came together kind of quickly at the end from what I heard. I don't think that he was necessarily on their radar for a long time, no matter what you might hear or read. I think it kind of came together that last weekend. And who knows what would have happened if Oklahoma had won that game, the Bedlam game. They still would have been alive for the playoff. That didn't stop Brian Kelly from leaving Notre Dame to go to LSU. The Fighting Irish are still kind of on the fringes of the playoff, and they could make it, which would create a really awkward situation. But I think a grand slam hire for the Trojans.
Oh, I think it's an absolute grand slam hire, too. I would place a futures bet right now on Jackson Dart to win the Heisman next year. I mean, it might, not pay out. He might not even be the starting quarterback, but I think Jackson Dart's that type of talent and fits the mold of a Lincoln Riley quarterback that can make noise. So I love it. And what it's going to do is it's going to keep all the other LA quarterbacks. Like that's your hotbed for recruiting, like of quarterbacks. That's LA is a place to go if you're looking for the next best thing for a quarterback. So Lincoln Riley is going to keep all those, the top LA quarterback each year is going to stay home and go to USC, which is huge. The challenge that I think Lincoln Riley is going to have is making USC the power style, not a finesse team like Oklahoma. USC is going to have to be dominant in the trenches. When USC was the USC with Pete Carroll, they were on both sides of the ball a dominant force. And Lincoln Riley's teams in Oklahoma are not known for that. They're not known for being a power football team that can outmatch you and just run it down, punch you in the face. So that's, I think, his challenge is getting people around him and recruiting those pipelines in the Pac-12 and in the trenches, recruiting in Texas, and if he wants to recruit, against one of those SEC schools too. But if USC is going to be the mecca, it's going to have to be a team that is the most physical in the Pac-12. That's more physical than Oregon, more physical than the Utahs and the Washingtons. They're going to get the athletes, but can you be better than the guy in front of you when it counts on offense and defense?
Quarterbacks real quick. West Coast quarterbacks, we've seen Tua Tagovailoa go from Hawaii to Alabama. We've seen DJ Uiagalelei go from L.A. to Clemson. These are the kind of quarterbacks that USC historically has always gotten, but the recent landscape of college football has allowed teams like Alabama, Clemson to come out west and kind of poach these kids. So I'm curious to see what Lincoln Riley does. I know, was it Malachi Brown or Malachi Nelson, the number one overall quarterback for the 2023. He decommitted from Oklahoma and is now committing to USC. So already a good sign for Lincoln Riley and the Trojans. All right, guys, we got just a few minutes left here of the podcast. We got Pac-12 championship this weekend. Utah versus Oregon. I'm out. I'm out. So I'm out. I'm out of the Pac-12 race.
I'll offer some context on that.
This is all Alec White and Michael Lev. I'll give you my score prediction, who I think is going to win, but this is your guys' show.
So
explain.
Everyone that's listened to this podcast all year long during the football season has seen us or heard us do our Pac-12 pick'ems against the spread, over-unders, and straight up each week, picking Arizona games, picking the rest of the Pac-12 slate, and we kept a standings record. And so after this weekend, we had a tie for first place in the winner. We're doing it winner of the group buys everybody else lunch because, you should be benefiting off of that and the money you make, even if we're not gambling, monetarily. But Lev and I tied for first place after this weekend. Justin, like you said, you're out of the sweepstakes in last place. So you went 34-28 straight up, 30-31-1 against the spread, and 5-7 with the over-unders. I had the best record picking straight ups. Lev, you had the best against the spread pick at 32-29-1. So we've got we can either go all in for this one to settle it with just picking the spread of the Pac-12 game. We kind of talked about this off air, or we could go a three-way battle here and do Oregon, Utah spread and the over-under plus just the USC-Cal game spread. I'm going to leave this decision up to you.
Let's do it all.
Do it all.
I say let's do it all. And we don't know what each other are picking. We might end up picking the same thing. So, Justin, why don't you go first on the Pac-12 championship game, if you will?
Yeah.
I predicted that this would happen, not on the podcast, just on Twitter. I'm like, of course, what's going to happen is Utah is going to spank Oregon, and then Oregon's going to turn around and win the Pac-12 championship. So, yeah, the Ducks historically, I mean, have they ever lost a Pac-12 championship game since the game was created? I don't think so. With that being said, I'm going with the Oregon Ducks to win and to cover. Give me the Oregon Ducks.
Yeah, all right. I am also going to go with Oregon. They are getting 3 points, so you get a little bump there. That's a nice thing. I follow Justin's line of thinking here that we've kind of seen this from Oregon in the past. Maybe they have that one late season stumble, but they find a way to rally. You're not going to have the same energy in the building playing the game in Vegas as you did that night in Salt Lake City. And Oregon was moving the ball in that game. They kind of had some Arizona-esque problems of being unable to score. And I also think it's just really hard to play your best week after week after week after week. And Utah's been doing it for so long now. They might be due for a game where they're not quite at their best. So I'm going to take Oregon. And I'm also going to take under the over-under, which I think is right now 58.5.
Yep.
Is what I've got. Yeah, I'm going to take the under, and I'm going to take the Ducks.
I'm going to go Oregon. Or not Oregon, I'll go Utah. Sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Threw you guys for a loop. No, I'll go Utah -2.5 to win this game. You know what? I could go Oregon. I could really see a scenario where the Ducks do win this, but Utah was a better team in round one by a pretty wide margin. I don't know. I'm gonna go Utah. Kind of don't feel great about it per se, but
it's not. It's not interesting if you don't.
No,
so you kind of.
I kind of got forced on a ledge right here between a rock and a hard place. So I'll go Utah to win and cover this one, and I'll also go under. I can't forfeit. Can't fully commit to picking the over here. I think it's going to be like a 30-24 game.
I got 24-20.
So, the under hits. And then USC and Cal, since you got the
game,
first pick.
The game that should not be played, yet is being played.
Cal's favored by 4. You know what? This is the week of USC. USC is back. I think USC covers the 4 points and wins.
All right, I'm going to go the other way. Not just for fun, but I was definitely planning to do that. I think USC is just in a weird state right now. Like, they know who their new coach is going to be. Their old coach is on the way out. They played really well against BYU. Now they have to go up to Cal. It's going to be kind of low energy in the building. Cal at least has senior day going on, so they kind of got that going for them. They're the ones who wanted to really play this game. I don't know what USC has to play for at this point, so I'm going to take the Bears. to win and cover.
Give me the Bears. I think USC's at a point in the season where they just want to get it all over with. Begin their holiday break and move on to the Lincoln Riley era. This is just one of those weird games. Not going to be a lot of people there. And I think Cal really wants to put a final stamp on the season because they still have bowl hopes, right?
Nope. No, they lost to UMass.
They're done? Okay, so
UCLA. So
this is kind of like
both teams
a bowl
are 4 and
for
7.
both of them.
Yeah.
This is oh my gosh.
At 9 p.m. Mountain Time.
Nobody cares.
8 o'clock Pacific after all the important games have been played on Saturday. It's so weird.
I think I'd rather watch Hawaii play than watch USC versus Cal. So I'm going to go with the Golden Bears.
All right, and that'll do it for our
it?
Pac-12 picks.
All
This
right.
is we're signing off. Maybe
Congrats to either one of you guys. Don't know which one.
May the best man win or lose if you don't want to pay for lunch. So we've got that.
Wait, did you just tank, Alec? Did that just happen?
No, I legitimately am riding with Utah in the under in this one.
I thought I could get away with load management during the season. Pac-12 picks, like, I could throw away a couple of games. But
well, maybe we'll bring some of this back for basketball season. We'll get Bruce Pascoe, our basketball colleague, involved in this.
And with that being said, it's officially basketball season. The men's and women's team both ranked in the top 11. Men's number 11. The women's team ranked number 7. So basketball is popping right now. We got other things happening. It's almost bowl season, so we'll, of course, have Arizona Bowl coverage. There's all sorts of things happening in Tucson, Arizona, so no shortage of sports content. Make sure you check us out on Tucson.com and download the Wildcaster app for free off the App Store and Google Play. Thanks for listening.